Welcome to the Modern CPA Success Show, the podcast dedicated to helping accounting firms stay ahead of the curve. Our mission is to provide you with the latest and greatest insights on cutting-edge tools, innovative marketing strategies, virtual CFO services, and alternative billing methods. Join us as we change the way people think about accounting.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. I'm Joey Kinney. I'm joined today with Adam Hale to my right on the screen. Adam is partner in charge, not partner in charge, but you are partner at Anders. You're, what is your title with the VCFO organization, Adam? It's changed a couple times.
I just do stuff. Don't worry about it.
That's fair. And then down below us is Lori Miller. Lori and I are, the new title is E&S VCFO support, whatever the role is. Call me what you want. Just don't call me late to dinner. Like Adam, we solve problems. The idea behind this podcast today is to serve not only as, an introduction to onboarding for specific trainings for CFOs and controllers, but also just to talk about the process of onboarding in general. It's a term that I didn't know, Adam, until I joined Summit 2 years ago to the day as we're recording this. And it's not really something that I was aware of. And I think there's a big gap in someone new coming into the organization thinking about what onboarding means, specifically onboarding a client into our system. So where I'd love to start this, Adam, with you is can you explain a little bit about the background of onboarding? When did you, as you were building this thing up, when did you realize that a formalized onboarding process was going to be a key to the success? And when did, what were some of the steps that you took to get us from where we were to where we are now?
Yeah, formalized onboarding, probably whenever, Jody and I stopped leading all of the new client engagements, really is whenever we started to kind of notice that it needs to be more formalized. And really the feedback came from the clients.
Yeah.
I think onboarding in its own right, the tasks and the things that you're doing are always going to happen no matter what. It's just, are you doing it in a systematic way? Is it time locked? Those kind of things. And we had clients just coming back to us going, man, it feels like we've been onboarding or getting started for the last 6 months. We work with a lot of digital agencies. They have formal onboarding processes and discovery process, that kind of stuff. So we kind of got educated a little bit to, how they do things. And from there, we kind of just took, okay, here's the building blocks. These are the things that we need to get accomplished. Because at the end of the day, we're promising in a sales call a lot of things that we're going to be able to activate and do on behalf of the client. And so the client wants us to get there from 0 to 60 as fast as possible. And I've been through several onboarding processes myself as a customer, and some of them are just painful. And so we're always trying to just look for different ways, better ways to do things that are more effective, more efficient.
Lori, thinking about how Anders was doing onboarding before the merger a couple of years ago, I think one of the first things we learned was that the way Summit viewed onboarding and the way Anders viewed onboarding were very different. What were some of the things that y'all were doing that you thought were really important to your success in terms of how to get new clients in and get them up and running as quickly as possible?
Onboarding, I think for us was really developing that relationship and getting to know the clients. Kicking off, we did push more projects, I think, out to the normal engagement, I guess, when you're actively doing that. But it was really about establishing the relationship, making them feel comfortable and making them feel more a part of Anders, just that they're now, we're a team.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the things I took away from the merger and where the deficiencies in our onboarding process was, speaking specifically about discovery. I remember talking with Scott Hoffman. He was like, yeah, we do a lot more discovery at the beginning of our engagements than y'all do. What are some of the things that you would learn during that piece of the puzzle that you'd like to see carried forward on all onboarding engagements?
Yep, good point. Discovery for us. So we got into their accounting software. We kind of looked under the hood, made sure there weren't any glaring errors, any huge red flags that, hey, nothing had been done for a few months, or just totally wrong balances on the balance sheet that the client did not know about, or just that the scope, right, that there's 10 large bank accounts rather than just one. So looking at the accounting software, looking into the payroll software, trying to understand at a really high level what's going on in their books.
Elevate your firm with a virtual CFO playbook, how to land $60,000 per year clients and provide a killer client experience. This comprehensive online series of modules provides you with the essential tools to create and deliver scalable VCFO services. Developed from Summit's successful approach, which propelled them from $500,000 to over $10 million in revenue in 10 years. This playbook will equip you with the skills to take your firm to the next level. Additionally, upon completion, you can receive 24 hours of CPE credit for the course. Ready to grow your firm? Enroll now at vcfoplaybook.summitcpa.net.
Thinking about, Adam, where we came from here, that the discovery piece is something new that we have tried to bring in, and we've leaned pretty heavily on Lori for that piece and building out the new onboarding process. What are some things that you think about in discovery when, like, if you were putting on your hat and saying, I'm a new CFO, like, I don't even know what discovery means. From a VCFO perspective, what are some things you would be looking for if you were doing an onboarding starting tomorrow on that discovery piece?
Yeah, I mean, from a CFO perspective, it really does start at the sales call. So you're
Mhm.
digging into, where their pain points are. You're wanting to hear a little bit more about their story, what motivates them, where they feel like they are now, because they're often a little bit confused. From a financial perspective, they're like, oh, we do this and we do this. And it's like, whenever you start looking at stuff, you'll quickly find that they're not likely where they think they are.
Mhm.
And then most importantly, obviously, where they're going. So we do a little bit of that in the sales call. So we feel like we had from an advisory standpoint, we feel like we get a good start at that on that first call. So listening to that call and really kind of tuning into what the client's saying is really important. And then following that conversation up and getting a lot deeper into details in terms of, again, understand why they got in business in the first place, what they're trying to accomplish, where they think they are, and where do they want to be. Those are really the things that, as an advisor, those are the things that you really need to unearth and discover right out of the gate, because ultimately, at the end of the day, those conversations are going to be what crafts how you're going to kind of navigate the entire engagement, really, because if they don't care about this but they care about that, you're going to start to measure the KPIs that way. You're going to make sure you adjust the charts of accounts that way. You're going to start leaning your consulting that direction. Those are really important conversations.
Well, I think that's a great point about that sales call not living in a vacuum, right? Like, that is kind of that foundation of the entire thing, because expectations are being set with the client during that. And it's one of the things that was a little bit, I don't want to say shocking to me, but was one of the things that I kind of learned pretty quickly working with Summit for the first time, was like, for a lot of our clients, this is maybe the biggest engagement they're going to do outside of paying their people. I've heard from multiple folks like, hey, you are our largest line item that's external to our organization as a whole. And that relationship is so huge and so key that if we're not paying attention, like you said, to that sales call and trying to pick up and learn from that sales call, pain points are a great thing, but also, like, how do they see the company? How do they see the vision? Where have they gone? Where are they going? If we're not using that as CFOs to guide the storytelling and the story that we're trying to craft with our financials and KPIs, we're missing the mark on that. A couple things we've talked about here. Lori, you kind of mentioned building that relationship, and I think that's a great way to think about it, because it should be a partnership more so than like a vendor-vendee relationship. What are some tips for somebody who's new to the organization coming in on how to build some of those relationships with not just the client, but also with, you might be working with a senior on the account who you've never worked with before. You might be working with an E&S support person that you've never worked with before. What are some tips for building those relationships and getting the soft skills?
Me up first. All right. I think with the client, first and foremost, it's just having those conversations, right? Face to face, video to video, whatever it is. Getting them on the phone, understanding what Adam just talked about, but then going a little bit further, right? You want to ask about what they like to do outside of work and just start some of that conversation that you can have down the road. Internally, I think what I have found the most is bringing that team on board as early as possible in the onboarding, getting them in on those initial calls. making the introduction, allowing them to be part of the process, getting their buy-in that this client is cool, right? Understand the industry, understand what they do, what they want. Getting them engaged as much as possible, as early as possible, has been key. And then having like those weekly syncs with the team, keeping everybody talking, everybody communicating, giving their updates, not letting people sit quietly in those, leading the all of the meetings in that way, I think is key.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I would say, um, I agree with everything you just said there. And I think the big thing is whenever we say onboarding, that's very tactical, right? It's like we're going to do these things, but really it just means first impressions. And so if you want to build a good relationship with somebody, you got to make sure that you're actually doing what you say you're doing, and we're accomplishing that kind of stuff. This is your opportunity to really kind of, you need to really show up prepared for these meetings. So doing a little bit of pre-work before the call, making sure you understand their information. Don't go in there just blindly asking them questions. So I think if you show up well into those meetings, I think that's a good tip and trick. Also, sometimes during the onboarding process, things can get very tactical. And if you have owners that are just kind of outside of the day-to-day, they really don't want to be involved with that kind of stuff. So it's really important to listen to what type of meetings and the things that we need to do, and make sure that we're offering up just having those outside of the owner so that they don't necessarily have to do that. It's an opportunity for the rest of the team or yourself to connect with people inside of the organization that's not the owner, because you're not having to worry about, talking to 2 or 3 different people or serving the owner directly. But at the same time, I would also say do the exact opposite of that and find some time whenever you're just meeting with the owner, because that's whenever you're going to be able to dig into some of those. In both of those situations, you're going to be able to dig into more of those personal things. Make sure you remember those kind of things, bring them to the next conversation. Make sure that you make room inside of those conversations for personal conversations. Of course, everybody goes to the weather, but once you start to learn and know somebody, you can kind of lean on those kind of things and just make sure that you're activating that whenever you're talking to them. But definitely have one-on-one conversations. I can't stress that enough, because in big group settings, it's going to be really tough to create those relationships.
Well, especially because you might need to be having a conversation with the owner about other members of the team who are a part of the group. I think of one group I work with in particular where I have 2 to 3 meetings a month with them, but like 2 of those meetings are incredibly tactical. I'm working directly with the COO and her team. I'm working directly with them on things like building out a forecast and their forecast tool, getting the nuts and bolts correct. And that is an incredibly different type of conversation than the one I have with the owner, where it's like we're going to put, get a little bit higher level or talk more about sales pipelines or what his goals are for the company and those types of things. But, to your point, it's all about it's finding the right person to have that relationship with. And it's one of the number one tricks that I give to new CFOs is identify pretty quickly. Like if it's a RevRec meeting that you're doing, is the owner the right person to talk about RevRec with? If the owner doesn't own the HubSpot and the owner doesn't do any of that stuff, then no, they can just be informed about that meeting. Give the takeaways, figure out a way to report up to that individual what the takeaways are, but leave the tactical stuff with the person who does the tactical stuff.
Yeah.
And the onboarding is the perfect time to figure that out.
Yeah, you have to, your Spidey sense has to be high. If you start to sense frustration from the client, or you can tell that maybe there's something else that you need to dig into, there's many times whenever I tell the team, it's like, hey, offer up, like, just send them a quick note and say, hey, you mind if we talk tonight, or we talk, and I offer up my cell phone all the time. I've never had a client abuse it. No client calls me all the time. In fact, as you start to build those relationships, they'll text you just like your friends do sometimes, and just say, they'll be talking about personal stuff whenever they reach out to me. They don't talk business generally whenever they're texting me or doing any of those kind of things. So it's really important that you kind of establish that relationship, that connection. You want to be their first phone call whenever it comes to some of these pressing issues, and you can establish that trust and that relationship pretty easily whenever you're talking to them and you're like, and again, don't do it just to do it, but I'm saying, like, in instances where you can kind of see something's wrong, you can tell they're going to have to go through a riff and lay a bunch of people off. It's like, hey, maybe this is a more sensitive call and we should just one-on-one this, and then make sure you jump on that call. It's went a long way for helping for me to build relationships with my clients.
I had a guy that I worked for tell me one time, and this has stuck with me throughout my career. In the life cycle of an engagement with a client, and we do long-term engagements, like our average engagement's what, 4.5, 5 years, like that's kind of the average.
Right.
In that time frame, you're going to have 1 to 2 opportunities to really make a difference in that person's life. There's going to be other things that are important, but like 1 to 2 critical things are going to happen in that timeline. And if you miss that opportunity, you've missed it forever. Whereas if you recognize that opportunity up front and really take care of that person, not just as a client, but as a human, you will have a client for life in that regard. And that's something that's always stuck with me as good practical advice. I think the other thing I took away from that, Adam, is as a CFO, and Lori, you kind of touched on this too, being a leader in that room is important, which means as the CFO, like you can't be switched off during those meetings, especially with our delivery model, which is much more remote. Like I'm going to butcher the stat, but it's like 90% of all communication is nonverbal, and you only see us from here up. So you've got to be really paying attention as a CFO to like, what's the nonverbal stuff going on in the room? What are the cues? How's the vibe in the meeting? Is it good? Is it bad? And if you're just kind of zoned out and you're not really leading it actively from that perspective, you're going to miss that. And that's huge. Thinking a little bit more about, we're recording this in March of 2024. And the idea is for this to kind of be some evergreen content. But one of the things that we're rolling out right now that's not evergreen is we're kind of revamping the structure a little bit with terms of support. And support is a word that carries a lot with it. But, Lori, you're in my role throughout onboardings, and as CFOs and controllers are watching this training, is we're there as support resources. So, Adam, I wanted to hear from you specifically as kind of the architect of the big vision of the company and where we're going and how we're going to scale. What sort of role is the ENS team, not just myself and Lori, but also Miranda and Kaylee and Lydia, our project management team, all of the different moving pieces? What role are we playing in onboarding, and how can we best be utilized by CFOs and controllers? Also, the FDAs. Don't want to forget the FDAs because they're a huge part of this too.
Absolutely. I mean, invaluable resources. Like we didn't just like make these roles up. We've learned a lot from clients and from ourselves over time, that there are just outside roles from maybe your day-to-day process where people could use additional support, whether it's from an organizational standpoint. That's going to be the project manager, connecting calendars, connecting dots, holding people accountable to getting some things done. There's those aspects where they can add extra weight. Having strategic conversations, having somebody else in the room that has a lot of experience that you can bounce ideas off of, like, hey, here, look at this with me. That's where the CFOs are going to help out with. If there's an accounting issue, that's where an ENS support member from the that's more manager focused or controller focused can kind of come in and look at the financials and help you kind of wade through that stuff. Mm-hmm. And then of course, whenever it comes to putting together the forecast, sometimes the technology gets in the way and it's a little bit difficult to decipher, and you need somebody to help with that lift. That doesn't mean that you're not architecting things. And I think what's really important in all those ancillary roles that we're talking about, you're still kind of the nucleus. You're expected to lead the engagement all the way through and help direct those folks. So they're not in place to say, hey, I've got this, I do that, you go do this. That's not how it works. It's, I do everything, and I have these additional resources to make sure that I can get it accomplished well and timely, those kind of things. And so making sure you understand how to leverage those resources around you are really important. And the people on those teams are extremely gifted, and they know how to help leverage the team. But again, it's not one of those things where you just kind of abdicate certain tasks to them. You're still overseeing them, architecting, controlling that process. But we have this other support team that's really helping to move things along in a very formal way that is fast and efficient, and clients, frankly, come to expect.
I think the other thing too there, and this is, Lori, where I want to get your thoughts as well. There's a new piece of this structure that we haven't had on the Summit side that's been part of the Anders cultures for years, which is the coaching. Even outside of I know on the ENS team, we directly coach, but like also there's other coaches and those types of things that are available. What sort of stuff can people come to expect from their coach?
Coaching can take a lot of different directions.
Mhm.
It is what you want it to be, and it will be as much as you put into it, you'll get out of it. Coaching relationships are there to help progress your career, to give ideas and support and mentorship of where you want to get and a kick in the butt of how to get there. Talk about goals, or it can be talk about life. Get through hard times. It's just it's a continual support within the team. I think we've developed some really good friendships, some professional, relationships out of coaching, but it's a great opportunity to get to know team members really well, and motivate yourself just from hearing their stories, their experiences, and help you get where you want to go.
And I think it's a great point there too, that it's, you get what you put into that on the coaching.
Right.
That, if you're, a newer individual to the organization and you're not actively seeking out your coach,
Right.
like, you're missing that opportunity. And it's, I think about, Adam, when you were talking about the architecture there, the CFOs and controllers who are most successful in onboardings are the ones who know where they want things to go, and they can come to you, they can come to me, they can come to Lori, they can come to Jamie Naw, or any of those other folks who maybe have a little bit more experience on what they're doing. If you can come to those meetings saying, hey, Adam, I know this is where I want to go. I'm having trouble bridging this gap. Can we talk about some ideas? That's a conversation that, A, I have never seen you turn down ever. You will never turn down having that conversation. And B, you're able to have a much more positive outcome for everybody because it's a collaborative. You're not just the ones who are like, hey, Joey, just tell me how to do this. I'm like, I'm not getting a lot out of that as a coach. And B, you're not getting a lot out of it either. So I think that's a really important thing, that you've got to know where you're wanting things to go. And if that's a problem, then okay, that's a different problem that needs to be solved. But like that part of that engagement from the CFO or controller is the key to having not just a successful onboarding, but just a successful experience here.
Yeah, and I think the same goes for the CFOs and controllers should ask the same of their team. Everybody
Correct.
should manage up.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody should come with, hey, this is what I'm thinking about. This is why I'm thinking about it. Here's the solution I'm thinking about. I always tell people I never want to see your ears between your hands and just come and say, hey, do this for me. That's not going to happen. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I need to make sure that you fully understand the question that you're asking and what needs to be done in order for you to really understand the answer. Because otherwise you're just going to do it. Even if I gave it back to you, you're going to do it, but you might not understand it because you're not having to think through the problem as much. So we definitely want to make sure we spend some time doing that kind of stuff for sure.
Yeah, I think it's the other thing too that I wanted to mention as part of this little section of the training is, full disclosure, when I came to Summit, I thought the expectation of me was you should be able to do everything. And I thought that I had to deprogram myself to say I had to deprogram the part of me that didn't want to go ask Steve and Jake and Max for help on the tech side. Like, I think the important thing to understand is that a long time ago, we made the decision as a company to invest in these resources. We did not invest in these resources for you to not utilize them. That's what they're there for. And so if that's something that you're feeling like, try not to do that, because don't be like dumb Joey who kept thinking he had to do Excel when Steve Richardville's forgotten more about Excel than I know. Like, that's what we're there for. That's what the team is here for. And, if you're not utilizing those resources, I have a lot more questions than I do if I'm like, oh, someone's leaning on us a little bit too much. One of those is a lot easier to solve than the other.
Yeah, I think again, it kind of comes back to how do you utilize those services.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
again, it's not you're going to Steve and saying, I don't know, can you build this thing for me? It's no, I've sketched it out. Here's how I want it to be built. This is where I'm getting information from, and this is what I want it to look like. Can you help me do that? I do that all the time with our tech team, and it's amazing. They come back and go, okay, I had to change this and change that because this is the way the data comes in. Is this cool? And I'm like, oh yeah, actually, now that you did that, can you do this too? They do amazing, amazing things, but you just need to tell them what are the inputs? What do you want it to look like on the outside? And then they can kind of,
What are
gut
our
the thing
opportunities
together.
for automation, if there are any, and how do we go from there?
100%.
Yeah. Okay, I think we can wrap here on this one because and I want the folks watching this video to know there's going to be a lot more training, like tactical stuff on how to do this. This is just kind of a primer to think about, like, because you've heard us talk about forecasts, you've heard us talk about KPIs and all those things, and we'll get there. But one of the questions that we talk about specifically related to onboarding is sort of what is the expectation of the CFO and controller, and how do we know? And this is always our question: how do we know if we've won when it comes to onboarding? And I think one of those answers is pretty easy. We've won if everything's set up and the client's happy and we did it timely. But there's some other things in there too that I think we need to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, those are the obvious ones, right? Like we can
Mhm.
all check the boxes and make sure that we went through the checklist and we've been meeting expectations in terms of the timeline. Timeline is important because, again, this
Yeah.
is where we're building trust with the client, and we're saying, hey, we're good at these things and this is when we can get them done. Obviously, we know clients are blockers, so you have to get really good at communicating and trying to pull those things through to make sure that we're meeting our expectations from that perspective. But from a VCFO and a controller perspective, you are wanting to make sure that you walk away at the end of that with a deep understanding, again, of what the client does, where they're at, and where they're going. Those are the things that will set up a really good advisory relationship. And if you know those things and you've taken the opportunity to have some one-on-one conversations and build some rapport with the client, I think you're going to walk away with a really good advisory relationship at all levels, even if we're only touching the books once a month versus, we're in the leadership meeting on a weekly basis. It doesn't matter. I have similar relationships with clients that I've served in both capacities. That doesn't change because one client has a higher service than the other. All those things exist and are true at every service level.
Lori, what about you? What
Yeah,
is
I
success
think
for you?
to add to what Adam is saying, I think having the right people on our team, on your client team, in the right place, and kind of let them do what they're good at, bring them in, use your resources, leverage it as much as you can. But if you have a good team beneath you, and you're utilizing them to the fullest, you're not on your own, you're not doing it all, Joey. And it's going to be a better experience for everybody, including the client. So I think they'll feel that too if you're collaborating and all, working at the same thing.
Yeah, you're right, Lori. That's in addition to the relationship with the client, you should be building those relationships and making those deeper with the internal team as well. Because there's going to be times whenever you're leading them and they're not going to understand exactly, you got to be really good about painting what done looks like. You got to be very explicit about what you want accomplished and what it looks like to the internal team as well, so that they have all the tools that they need to be successful. So, making sure that you're taking responsibility. You're not, again, abdicating tasks to them, but you're actually showing that you're giving them the tools that they need, and then the time on the review of all those things to understand. That'll help establish and build some of those relationships. And the team, sometimes some team members are going to be better at some things more than others. So just make sure that you give it the time and attention that it needs all the way through the process.
Yeah, I think that's probably the hardest thing with onboarding is there's the natural human desire to standardize it as much as possible. And I think across the broad swath of clients, I would say for most clients, 50 to 75% of it is going to be roughly the same, right? Like accounting is accounting, debits and credits are the same no matter where you go to college or what business you're in, right? It's that 25% about that client that makes them special and unique. That's the difference between what we offer and what somebody else offers. And that's where, again, we can try to standardize the thought process as much as possible. But at the end of the day, as the CFO or controller, it's our function and our job there to flesh out what that 25% is and make sure we're hitting it every time.
Agreed.
Cool. Well, Lori, Adam, thank you so much for taking some time to record this. This is, again, going to live kind of at the beginning of a training to kind of get everybody involved. There's going to be a lot more down the line that's going to be more specific and more tactical, but hopefully this was a good overview of how we see onboarding, why we onboard, some good tips and tricks, and some other things that you can take away to ultimately be successful when you get the call from Adam saying, hey, I've got a new client for you. It starts tomorrow. Get excited. Here's the sales call. So thank you all so much for joining us.
Thanks.
Enjoy this podcast? Visit our website, summitcpa.net, to get more tips and strategy for achieving modern CPA firm success. We're here to be a resource in this ever-changing industry.